Hello, I'm Professor Keith Brown and I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm an ambassador for a wonderful organisation called Faith in Later Life. It's not the only hat I have though, I do multiple things. I used to be the director and the leader of the National Centre for Social Work. I've been a government advisor for many years and I currently chair the National Health Service Adult Safeguarding Network and a couple of the safeguarding boards, and I lead the national research into fraud and scams. So I have many hats, specialising really in working with and caring for older people in society. And today in this first short video, we're going to be talking about loneliness and why loneliness matters. Loneliness is one of the biggest problems that we face in society. It's often underreported and not very well understood. And of course, we can be lonely at any stage of life. You don't have to be older to be lonely. But it's clear that it's mainly older people that form the majority of lonely people in our society. And the impact of being lonely is vast. I want to tell you a couple of stories about my research. Many years ago, I was doing the early research looking at fraud and scams. You'd be surprised to know that the National Scams team has only been around since 2012. Fraud and scams have been around clearly for a lot longer. But in those early days, we were trying to understand more about fraud. And I went into a gentleman's house with the training standards officers. And this gentleman had a specialist postal service. He received so much junk mail that the standard postie wasn't able to deliver it. They had to have a special delivery because he got so much junk mail. And his house was full of tat. Indeed, he had 3 garden sheds in his garden full of junk and rubbish, things he'd bought. And yet, in his dining room, next to his kitchen, he had a table that was neatly laid out with some writing pens and some envelopes, some paper and some stamps. And I challenged this gentleman. I said, don't you realise that you're responding to fraud, you're responding to criminals trying to take your money from you? And he said something that had a profound impact on me. He said this: the only reason I have to get up in the morning, the only reason I have to exist, is to wait for the postie and to respond to the mail that comes to me. He was so lonely, he met nobody, he communicated with nobody, and his world revolved around dealing with postal fraud and postal scams. Now, this type of loneliness and the impact of this loneliness became even more acute as an issue a couple of years later when I was fortunate, I thought fortunate anyway, to be undertaking the research for the National Scams team on the use of call blocking technology. Most of you watching this will have had somebody at some time phone you or email you or text you trying to elicit information from you and basically trying to defraud you of your money. And the National Scams team had been given a fairly large government grant to install call blocking technology into older people, particularly lonely older people who'd previously been scammed. And the idea of the research was to look at how the call blocking technology had made a difference to these people's well-being. They felt more comfortable and more safe in their own homes. Unfortunately, it became one of the most difficult pieces of research that I've ever undertaken for this reason. Many of the older lonely people who'd previously been getting 10 or 20 or 30 phone calls per week from criminals suddenly got no phone calls. And they were so lonely, they physically disconnected the call blocking technology. Frankly, they would rather have a criminal phone them to have somebody to speak to than to have nobody to speak to. Be very clear. Loneliness is very, very powerful. Loneliness is very, very painful. And loneliness can lead you into some very, very dark places. It has an impact on people's physical health. It has an impact on people's mental health. And as I've described, it leads people sometimes to do some things that you and I would think maybe are slightly odd or daft or even crazy. But loneliness will take you to those places, those dark places. One of my passions, as well as being an expert in this area, is also being a Christian. I was lucky that people cared for me when I was a child. Older people cared for me. They ran Sunday school classes, they ran youth groups. And I found my faith as a 12-year-old. That's over 50 years ago now. That's how old I am. I might not look it, but I am. And for over 50 years, it's been my privilege to serve my Lord and my Saviour. And one of the things I really want to urge you and encourage you is to think about loneliness and to what you might be able to do as a Christian, as a community, as a church community, as a church family, to help people in that state of loneliness where they're so depressed and they're so lonely they'd rather speak to a criminal than speak to nobody. Surely they'd be happier having a cup of tea with you, speaking with you, sharing their life story with you. So go on, be brave, go out there, meet lonely people, meet your neighbours, loved ones around you, people in your street, form relationships with them. You will make a profound difference to these people's lives. I trust you found this interesting today, and I encourage you, as individuals and as groups and as churches, do consider how you might make a profound difference to lonely people in our society. Thank you.